The 5 a.m. alarm cuts through the dark like a blade. Michael rolls out of bed, his joints popping with the first movement of the day. He does not reach for the snooze button. He does not have that luxury. By 6 a.m., he is behind the wheel of the delivery truck, navigating the gridlock of the morning rush. 10 hours of tight turns, heavy boxes, and unyielding deadlines follow. He does not stop for lunch. He does not stop for air. At 6 p.m., the truck engine dies, and the warehouse shift begins. He moves pallets until midnight. The concrete floor leaches the heat from his soles. His feet throb in a rhythmic, dull ache that matches the hum of the store lights. His eyes burn, fighting the urge to close as he stalks the final shelf. He returns to his dim apartment, eats a cold meal, and sets the clock back to 5 a.m. It is a 19-hour cage of his own making, repeated until the days blur into a single, exhausted blur of motion and fatigue. The hum of the refrigerator in his apartment was the only sound after midnight. It was a cheap, rattling noise that triggered a memory from 20 years ago. Michael sat at his small table, staring at a stack of unpaid letters. He saw his mother at the kitchen counter, her hands trembling as she held a disconnect notice. He saw his father pacing, checking the empty cupboards, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and impending failure. They were good people, but they were trapped in a cycle that consumed their spirit just to keep the lights on. Michael remembered the precise moment he looked at their faces and made a silent, internal promise. He would not be them. He would not trade his limited time for mere survival. The exhaustion of his 19-hour day suddenly felt different. It was no longer a prison sentence. It was the fuel for his exit. He gripped the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. Every ache in his back became a reminder of why he had to leave this existence behind. He was not just working to survive the night. He was building a wall between his future and the shadow of his parents' desperation. The delivery truck felt smaller that afternoon. Michael navigated the familiar route, his hands gripping the steering wheel while his mind drifted to the audio feed playing through the speakers. A voice spoke, clear and detached, cutting through the static of the engine. The goal is not to trade time for survival. The goal is to make money work for you. He pulled over to a curb, leaving the engine idling. He listened to the segment twice, taking notes on a crumpled receipt. The concept was simple, yet it dismantled everything he thought he knew about his existence. That evening, he skipped the usual stop at the convenience store for a sugary meal. He walked into his apartment and opened his laptop. The screen glowed in the dark room, reflecting in his eyes as he pulled up data on index funds. He did not watch television. He did not rest his aching limbs. He compared yields, calculated interest, and mapped out a path. He looked at his upcoming paycheck, then at the market figures, and made his decision. Every cent he earned from the warehouse would no longer go toward temporary comforts. It would go into the machine. He hit the transfer button, and for the first time, he felt the weight of his labor begin to shift from his back onto the ledger. Friday nights became the true test of his resolve. His phone would light up with messages from coworkers, drinks at the corner bar, or, "Come see the new grill I just bought." Michael would read them, set the phone face down on his kitchen table, and open his spreadsheet. He stayed inside. He kept the heat low to save a few dollars. While his friends gathered in crowded rooms, he sat in his dim apartment, tracking the slow, incremental growth of his portfolio. His peers noticed the change. They saw him driving the same sedan with the rusted fender, while they traded up for newer models with higher monthly payments. Comments started to surface in the break room. "You need a life, Michael," they would say, with a mix of pity and annoyance. He never argued. He kept his eyes on his task, stacking boxes and moving inventory. He saw their new trucks and their weekend trips as anchors that tied them to the very jobs he was building an exit strategy for. He endured their quiet judgment, the way they looked at him when he declined another round of appetizers. Every refusal was a brick in his wall. He was not just saving money. He was buying his own time back from a world that demanded he spend it. The double shift hit him with the weight of a physical blow. By the third hour of stocking the warehouse shelves, his feet burned with a dull, throbbing heat that radiated up his calves. He gripped the edge of a pallet to steady himself, his vision blurring as he blinked away the sting of sweat. The doubt was a quiet, persistent hum in the back of his mind. Was the math even real? Was the trade-off worth the agony of these endless, repetitive movements? He dropped a box of inventory, the sound echoing sharply against the concrete floor. He stood there, chest heaving, wondering if he could simply walk out and never return. He reached into his pocket, his fingers trembling, and pulled out his phone. He bypassed the notifications and opened the brokerage app. The screen glowed, displaying the current balance. It had moved, a few dollars higher since he last checked. A tiny, green arrow pointed upward. The sight cut through the fog of his exhaustion like a blade. He did not need to be happy. He did not need to be comfortable. He just needed to be consistent. He picked up the box, reset his grip, and turned back toward the aisle. The pain remained, but the doubt vanished. The 5th year arrived without fanfare, just another Tuesday morning of loading the truck. When Michael checked his account, the number was no longer 5 digits, it was 6. The sight of that leading digit silenced the remaining noise of his exhaustion. He stared at the screen until the reflection of the warehouse lights obscured the numbers. The tipping point had been crossed. For years, he had been the engine, burning his own physical energy to force the balance upward. Now, the machine was beginning to breathe on its own. The dividends hit the account, and they were no longer just cents. They were enough to buy whole new shares. The math had shifted. Every dollar he deposited now acted as a catalyst, pulling in interest that required no labor, no sweat, and no time from his day. He watched the growth rate tick upward, a subtle, rhythmic increase that moved faster than he could ever stock a shelf. He realized he was no longer trading his life for survival. He was feeding a system that had finally begun to feed him back. The weight of the crates felt different in his hands. The work was still hard, but it was now temporary. He closed the app, pocketed the phone, and turned back to the conveyor belt, knowing the hardest part of the climb was over. The warehouse floor was a grid of fluorescent hum and dust. Michael moved with a rhythmic efficiency that made his younger co-workers look frantic by comparison. One of them, a man who had only been on the shift for 6 months, leaned against a stack of crates and wiped sweat from his forehead. He watched Michael pull another shift without breaking stride. "Why do you stay, man?" the kid asked, his voice laced with genuine confusion. "You are here every night. You do not stop. You are going to burn out before you hit 40. Michael paused. He set the scanner down on the metal table. The ambient noise of the warehouse seemed to drop away as he reached into his pocket. He did not say a word. He pulled out his phone, unlocked the screen, and held it out. The kid leaned in, expecting to see a game or a social feed. Instead, his eyes locked onto the brokerage dashboard. The numbers were static, but they carried a weight that made the kid recoil. He looked from the screen to Michael, then back to the screen again. His jaw went slack. The pity he had held for the tired man vanished, replaced by a sudden, sharp clarity. Michael took the phone back, tapped the screen off, and picked up his scanner. "I am not burning out," Michael said. "I am finishing the plan." The passage of time became a series of spreadsheets and quiet late-night calculations. Michael worked his routes and his warehouse shifts, but his focus had shifted from the labor itself to the data behind it. One Tuesday, the alert pinged on his phone during a delivery stop. He leaned against the side of the truck and pulled the device out. The numbers refreshed. The passive income generated by his investments had finally eclipsed the total wages from both his jobs. He stared at the screen, waiting for the numbers to change, but they remained fixed in their new state. The machine was finished. He had spent a decade building a system that now produced more value than his own physical presence ever could. The realization did not bring a shout or a gesture. It brought a profound, heavy silence. He looked at the keys in his hand and the heavy sliding door of the truck. The burden of survival that had driven his every move since childhood simply dissolved. He was no longer a gear in the warehouse machine. He was an observer of his own life. He pressed the power button on his phone, watched the screen go dark, and felt the engine of the truck idling beneath him for what would be the very last time. The final route felt different. Every stop was a piece of history, a physical barrier he was dismantling one by one. He pulled the truck into the loading bay, killed the engine, and left the keys resting on the dashboard. He did not look back. He walked across the concrete floor of the warehouse, his boots echoing against the steel. The manager, a man who had tracked Michael's hours for years, stood by the dispatch desk. Michael reached the desk, pulled a single folded sheet of paper from his pocket, and slid it across the metal surface. The manager picked it up, read the lines, and looked up, his brow furrowed in genuine disbelief. He glanced at the empty delivery bay, then back at the paper, his mouth opening and closing without finding words. He looked at Michael, searching for the fatigue that had defined him for a decade, but found only a steady, quiet composure. The manager started to ask about the route, about the schedule, about the shift tomorrow. Michael simply shook his head, turned away from the desk, and began to walk toward the exit. He did not stop to explain. He did not wait for a counteroffer. The machine was running on its own, and for the first time in his life, he had nothing left to prove to anyone in this building. The heavy warehouse door swung shut behind him, cutting off the hum of conveyors and the sharp scent of cardboard. Michael stepped out onto the sidewalk. The afternoon sun hit his face, warm and steady. He stopped, planted his feet on the pavement, and closed his eyes. He took a long, deep breath, feeling the air fill his lungs without the weight of a clock ticking in his head. He did not win a lottery. He did not inherit a fortune. He simply refused to spend his future to pay for his present. He had turned 2 jobs into a machine that paid him while he slept, and now, that machine was his only master. He opened his eyes and looked down the street. For the first time in 10 years, he had no shift to report to, no route to finish, and no deadline to meet. He checked his phone once, not for stock prices, but to turn it off completely. He slid the device into his pocket, took another step forward, and walked away from the building. The distance between him and the life he no longer needed grew with every stride. He was the owner of his own time, and he finally had the silence to enjoy it.